All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. The power struggle in Niger is continuing. The plotters of the coup led by General Abdourahamane Tchiani, who came to power last month, have announced a new government. This, even as the West African bloc of ECOWAS has gathered for a key city in the Nigerian city of Abuja to discuss the course of action. The military leaders continue to defy the bloc's deadline. During the beginning of the meeting, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu said that the West African leaders should try all diplomatic routes possible to ensure a swift return to constitutional order in Niger, including dialogue with the coup leaders there. This comes after Niger's military junta had made the announcement in a televised broadcast wherein the government will be led by the newly installed Prime Minister Ali Mehman Lamine Ziane. Ziane will lead a 21-member cabinet. The newly formed government is about half the size of the previous one. And amongst the cabinet are three of the coup leaders who were named Ministers of Defense, Minister of Interior and Minister for Sports. This development has come just days after the ouster of the democratically but pro-Western leader, Mohamed Bazoum. The Niger's military junta, which triggered a major crisis in the West African nation, is making announcements in defiance of the calls by ECOWAS and other international organizations for the reinstatement of President Mohamed Bazoum. If you remember, the military junta had defied ECOWAS's ultimatum to reinstate Bazoum as president, and about 3 ECOWAS delegations had been sent to meet with the junta, all returning empty-handed. Now, keeping the developments unfolding in the West African nation, ECOWAS is also holding its second emergency meeting of the heads of states to discuss the issue of Niger in the Nigerian capital of Abuja. There have been several calls, especially within Nigeria, for the bloc to rethink its decision to use force. Now, the meeting in the Nigerian capital could, of course, prove to be pivotal in this standoff. The bloc's leaders are expected to agree on the next steps, which could, of course, include potential military intervention, something that the ECOWAS officials have said will be a last resort measure. Although there have been mixed feelings regarding the usage of military intervention to bring a swift resolution to the crisis. Residents of the capitals of Niger, Burkina Faso and Senegal have been divided on this issue.
For several weeks now, we have been hearing that ECOWAS is going to send troops to Niger. But me personally, I don't agree with that, because we are all Africans and Niger is part of the African continent. So we must all stand together in solidarity with our neighboring country Niger. But we can't send Africans to wage war against each other. Otherwise, I don't agree. I really don't agree with this for ECOWAS.
I'm in favor of restoring peace. As long as we act to restore peace, I'm a supporter. So peace is priceless. Because when we find ourselves in a troubled situation, it's better not to let it be a local affair. It has to be common for ECOWAS. Because the objective of this organization is what? It's to act together for the African family, for the good of the whole community.
And also to give us more insights in terms of what is unfolding in Niger at this moment and as to how the ECOWAS nations intend to take this forward. Being joined by Dr. Ambrose Egboke, is joining us live from Enugu in Nigeria. Dr. Ambrose is the chairman of the Guild of Public Affairs Analysts. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for joining us here on WION. The question that I want to ask you is this. The leaders of the 15 heads of states of ECOWAS have put their heads together in the Nigerian capital of Abuja to discuss the future course of action. But what is interesting is that they now seem to have toned down what earlier would have sounded like a threat. Earlier, it was a clear ultimatum that there could be a use of military force, but that is no longer the case in terms of what is now being heard by the ECOWAS leaders in Abuja.
Well, it is a diplomatic force for the leaders of ECOWAS to have issued ultimatum before the dialogue. Military option is what I also support in terms of as a last resort, because Africa has been plagued with coups and counter coups for over 60 years. And we must put a stop to that nonsense, because coup is not part of modern governance, and so must be stopped in Africa. And then there are other powers, like the Western powers, and some other countries outside Africa, have used coups in Africa to destabilize governments, legitimately elected governments, since the 1960s. And have used the military to do their bidding in Africa over the years. So there must be a clear message to coup plotters in Africa that Africa is no longer for coup, because every progressive government all over the world, it's in third world countries that are beginning to advance, like India. We talk about Singapore. We talk about even the UAE. Right. We talk about countries, Brazil and other countries that were in the third world, are now beginning to advance. Look at the BRICS nation. Right. These countries are not ruled by coup plotters. They are not ruled by the military. So, but the ECOWAS, in trying to tackle that, I think put the cart before the horse. We are supposed to, first of all, secure the release of the ousted president to make sure that he is alive. And we are supposed to have what's called an exit pathway for him, maybe right. to go to asylum in maybe Nigeria, Togo, or any of these African countries, ECOWAS countries. And then you bring him out first. After bringing him out, then you start negotiating with the coup plotters to surrender power so that he can be reinstated in a later date. But what is happening now is complicating the issues, because Bozo is still in their captivity. So what happens to him? What of if it is he is assassinated? What of if he's murdered? What of if he's incarcerated and cannot come out? So it was a very diplomatic fast path for ECOWAS to have threatened before negotiating. International diplomatic sequence would have been to issue a stern warning to say coups are not tolerated.
Right.
You follow that up with a contingent, and then to negotiate the release of the ousted president. After that,
Dr. Ambrose, I think you've made a couple of very important points here. Now, the question that I want to ask you is this. ECOWAS now appears to be more willing to negotiate, try and see whether diplomacy can work. But the question is this, with what is happening inside of Niger, where the military junta has now announced a government, 21 new cabinet ministers have been named, some of the coup leaders are part of this cabinet. It does not appear that the military junta in Niger wants to negotiate at all about the fact that it is in charge in the country now. With that being the case, do you think Nigeria, which has already slapped sanctions on Niger, would be willing to, in fact, as a key member of ECOWAS, to in fact consider the military option? You say it is an option of last resort, but how likely do you think that ECOWAS nations would in fact want to stage some kind of military operation on Niger?
I feel that the Nigerian government has to be very cautious in this matter, because it is looking like a Nigerian Niger affair. It is not. It is an ECOWAS affair. Though I do agree that Nigeria has a very strong leadership role to play in ECOWAS, but again, it should not go to it as a loner. Some certain actions taken by the Nigerian government makes it look as if it is a Nigerian-Niger issue. So the ECOWAS must, also other ECOWAS countries must try to bring sanctions on board to ensure that it tightens the grip on these military dictators that are parading themselves as leaders in Niger. Right. One of the things they should do, why coups are succeeded in Africa, is that after the coup, these leaders attend ECOWAS meetings. These military leaders become part of ECOWAS and organization and the AU, African Union. So what can start happening is that other countries, especially the border countries with that share the same boundary with Niger, should have closed the boundaries, right, and make sure that we tighten sanctions against Niger, and make sure the leaders in Niger do not attend ECOWAS meetings, do not attend AU meetings, do not are recognized as pariah states in the Committee of Nations. These will make sure that they surrender power quickly. And I think that could be a way forward. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ambrose, for joining us and getting us all those insights. We're completely out of time on this topic, though, but this is a story that we'll continue to track very closely here on WION. Thank you for having me. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.